What's up guys, it's River and today we're talking about the Canon 90D. This is a camera that I'm very excited to talk about because it's the follow-up to the also popular Canon 80D, which was an absolute monster hit for Canon. And this camera has a new sensor, a new video processing unit, and much better autofocus. But does it hold up in today's tough video camera market? So let's do a deep dive, see exactly who this camera's for, exactly what it does, and if it's right for you. And if you guys are interested, there's a link down below for the absolute best deal on this camera. So first things first, let's talk about specs because the image quality really matters. This thing has a 32 megapixel sensor, which is actually 2 megapixels more than the 5D Mark IV, but resolution-wise, you're in the same ballpark as the 5D Mark IV, although the 5D Mark IV has a full frame sensor, I know. But frame rate-wise, for photos, it does 11 frames per second with a 28 RAW buffer that's very respectful, very good for fashion, sports photography. Video-wise, it does 4K up to 30 and HD up to 120. This is an absolute dream for a filmmaker. And also, this camera is designed for filmmakers. More on that later. Although I should mention, this camera does not have any cinema profiles. No flat profile, no cinema profile, no log profile. The colors you get just straight out of the camera. Although Canon colors and just that Canon look is very popular, so most of you guys won't mind, but for cinematic work, where you're really pushing and pulling your colors and creating a look, this camera, no go. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Canon is known for their color profiles. The blues are just the right shade of blue. The skins are just perfect. Everybody looks attractive. The reds are nice and poppy. The oranges are bright and huey. Like, that's what people like about Canons. And if you're someone that's a content creator, a corporate filmmaker, a wedding guy, anything where you're just pumping out stuff all the time and you don't want to have to bother with color correction or just you don't have time for it, this camera's perfect because everything looks good out of camera and you can just tweak it a little bit, just like adjust the colors here and there and you're good to go. With Sony colors, like, get ready to spend your week getting those colors right. Sony makes great cameras, but the color science kind of sucks. For that, I think anybody that's pumping out content at a very fast rate, this camera is perfect. And if you're a vlogger or someone that just wants to make sure they look really good on video, this camera might just be what you're looking for because the Canon colors are tweaked to make sure that skin specifically looks very flattering on camera. And then generally I find people look more attractive with a Canon camera than they do with a Nikon simply because the colors are better. And the quality of the photos and videos out of this camera is just phenomenal. The 32 megapixel sensor gives you very sharp photos. You can really push and pull the colors with the RAW codec. And the video itself is super sampled, so the HD looks extra sharp, extra crispy, and it's a very appealing HD. The 4K, however, I found was a little bit soft, and to be honest, I'm not that impressed with the 4K in this camera. At this point, I'm really looking for cameras that have 4K at 60, like my Fuji X-T3. The 4K in this is serviceable if you want it, if you're a vlogger that wants to do 4K at 30, but to be honest, I think the 4K in this is just forgettable. If you really want good 4K, I think the Canon 5D Mark IV is a much better option. And a quick thing that I just want to bring to your attention, I've seen a lot of reviews talk about how the audio and the autofocus do not work in 120 frames per second, and do not let that deter you from not getting this camera. In 120 frames per second, you're in ultra slow motion, you should be pulling your own focus. Like, there's too much happening. If the camera was to pull focus for you, it would like literally be like a very slow focus pull. And audio, if you did listen to the audio slow down to 120, it'd be like super slow. Super slow. The 120 frames per second is perfect in this camera. It's sharp, it's crispy. I've heard a lot of flack for this camera in 120 frames per second mode, but it's very usable. Please do not let these other reviews deter you from it. It's a very good slow motion camera. Also, the ISO on this camera in low light is not the greatest. I'm not even gonna look at you guys right now because I'm embarrassed for Canon, but it's tops out at like 3200, which is kind of ridiculous. This thing should be way better in low light. And if you do want to know more about this camera, specifically in terms of video, there's a video review for the Canon 90D coming up, and be sure to leave me a like. It kind of helps me figure out what you guys like. Next, let's talk about autofocus. The autofocus in this camera is 12 out of 10. It's great. Canon's dual pixel autofocus is known for being industry leading and it's phenomenal. Everybody loves it. And face tracking as a technology overall is great. But with this camera, the way they implement it is really good. Just small touches like if you have multiple faces in your shot, you can use the toggle on the back to switch between the faces. These subtle little things make it more user-friendly because the technology is already there, but the way the user interacts with that technology is really well done in this camera. And for anyone that is new to Canon cameras, the autofocus in this camera is fast, reliable, and never hunts. And for those of you who already know this, go Team Canon. Overall, the autofocus in this camera is great like every other Canon camera, but I am a bit disappointed that I found the eyepiece was kind of hindering. Like when I first started shooting with this camera, I use the eyepiece a lot because, you know, that's what you do. You get a DSLR for that feel. But I found the live view was just more reliable, and I can see a lot of people being disappointed by that aspect and wishing that the eyepiece autofocus was a little bit better. But for video users, that is a good thing because having better autofocus through live view actually means you get better autofocus for video, and this is primarily meant to be a video camera. So if you are someone that's primarily using this for video, this autofocus is bang on. And I think part of the reason that the autofocus for video is really good in this camera is because of this lens. Most kit lenses are just serviceable, like they're just meant to get you from point A to point B. And a lot of times when you focus with them, especially in video, you can generally hear the lens clicking, which gets picked up by your mic, and it's kind of like choppy. You can see it kind of going through its different stages. But this 18 to 135 kit lens, oh my God, it is so smooth. Like just turning this focus motor in like manual mode, oh my God, it is buttery smooth. It is, and like I know some of you guys will get mad at me, as smooth as cinema glass, man. Like this is a very, very smooth focus ring. And when you have this lens going in like full autofocus mode, it is seamless. It is a very, very smooth rack, very, very good. If you're a documentary filmmaker and you want to just have a lens that's like a wide end to a telephoto lens and just kind of like let it go and just like record without having to worry about your autofocus, this is the lens and this is the camera. Like I genuinely feel this is the perfect documentary camera, which leads us really nicely into design. So right off the bat, this thing is designed for video people. It's got the little flip up screen. If you're a vlogger, you can see yourself. If you're a DP, you can put the subject to the side and just kind of like frame them up. It's got touch control, so you can just touch, get autofocus. But more importantly, one thing that I really appreciate, it has an LCD panel at the top. I found that when I was shooting with this, I would just look down, immediately see what my ISO, shutter speed, aperture was at, and that made a world of difference. It is just so much quicker to just quickly read what your camera's sitting at and just be able to shoot right away than to be like, oh, okay, hold on, what's my ISO at? And just like, it's less fiddling around and you're way more efficient as a shooter with this design. And as for the physical body of this actual camera, oh my God, it is such a dream to hold. It's like a nice, beefy, robust DSLR feel. It's got a nice deep grip. Like I think a lot of the reason people will buy this camera is simply because it's nice and robust and it gives you that DSLR feel. All the buttons are nice and clicky. I know some of you guys will be like, is this dude really geeking out about buttons? But the way a camera feels, the user experience is so important. If you're like a car guy, or if you're a watch guy, or if you're one of those guys that, or girls, that has things customized for the way you use it, you totally get what I'm talking about. The experience of using this camera is such a dream. Plus, this touchscreen in the back, it makes it way faster to use everything. The touchscreen is implemented in such a way that it's easy to navigate all the menus. It's almost faster than using the buttons if you don't want that satisfying feeling. But the touchscreen is really easy to use. You can touch it for autofocus, quickly get through menus. It is such an easy camera to use. Even if you don't know Canon cameras, are not familiar with the image, but you just want an easy camera to use, this camera is an absolute must. It is an easy camera to use. I really think I can give my grandmother this camera, and she's from like the 30s and 40s. Like she did not grow up with computers. She can figure this camera out. It's a very easy camera to use. A big factor in buying a camera like this is durability, and this camera, thankfully, delivers. It's made of anodized aluminum, so it feels nice and light, but you can drop this a few times though. Please don't. And it's weather sealed, so you can take this to jungle, humid conditions, get a bit of water on it, and you will be just fine. And one thing that I appreciate, it has a weather sealed SD card slot right there. A lot of people tend to put it down there, and it's very easy for water to get in there. If you do end up dropping your camera in water, water will not get in there, sand will not get in there, so your data is safe. Now, something that I want to touch upon really quickly is the I/O on this camera. Now, something that they got right was that when the mic is plugged in and your screen is flipped out, like maybe like this, if you're vlogging or whatever, that screen will never hit the headphone jack. They kept video people in mind. But I've seen a lot of people use this camera for live broadcast. And if you have the screen flipped out, for live broadcast, it actually blocks the HDMI port. So if you are planning to use this for a live broadcast, please, please, please keep this in mind, because I've seen people do Facebook Lives with this, and yeah, Canon, you messed that up. You got that right, but you got that wrong. Almost Canon. Next thing I want to talk about is software and menus. Whenever I pick up a Canon camera, it feels like I've been there before. It feels like I've used it before. And that's because all the Canon cameras have very similar menus, very similar software with like a few differences here and there. What I like about Canon menus is that they're not that cumbersome. There's a few options under each tab, unlike the Sony menus where you need a PhD to figure that stuff out. But the Canon menus are very simple, very like to the point. They don't really have any weird fancy wording where you're like, what does that mean? I need to Google that. Canon menus are really simple, easy to use. You could literally give this to your grandma and she will figure it out. Also, I did not forget about my vlogging buddies. This is a great vlogging camera. Let me bring the screen back out. This is a great screen for looking at yourself. It's nice and sharp, very bright screen. And overall, if you already have an 80D, I probably wouldn't upgrade because it just has some very basic quality of life upgrades. But if you don't have a camera for vlogging at all, get this. Or if you have kind of like a rinky-dink setup, this is great. Like, it's a little bit more than the 80D. And the 80D had a bit of a price drop because, you know, it's an older camera. But if you're just starting out, this is like your first big boy DSLR for vlogging. This is a great starting point. But if you're getting this camera just for the 4K, don't. The 4K is a little soft and it's not really that needed. As a vlogging camera, what really impresses me is the fact that the audio in this camera is much better than the 80D. It's juicy, like you can really hear yourself well. Even with a crappy mic, I recommend this camera because it's a good vlogging camera, great audio, and great screen. Just, if you already have an 80D, don't. The 80D will do you just fine. Last but not least, the battery. This thing has the LP6 battery, which is a classic, which is 1800 milliamps, which is just a little bit less than your iPhone. So this thing will go and go all day, because the big thing with batteries is having them die right in the middle of a great shot, right in the middle of a video. So this thing will go and go all day, no problem. This camera also has a battery grip available for it, but I don't recommend buying it. It's a $500 battery grip that just lets you add 2 extra batteries. Honestly, if you have a lot of money, go for it, buy a helicopter, buy me one too. But I don't think $500 is really worth it for a battery grip unless you really, really need it, like for professional work. In that case, I totally get it. But it's better to just buy off-market Amazon batteries for like 15 to 20 bucks a pop and just change them yourself. Because these batteries do last quite a while and it's very unlikely that you're gonna die right in the middle of a shot. I really don't think that battery grip is worth it. So at the end of the day, who's this camera really for? And the answer is pretty simple. Content creators and hardcore enthusiasts. If you're a content creator that just wants to whip content out to your followers, a 32 megapixel sensor with beautiful colors, you can just take photos, do minimal touching because everything looks so good right out of the box, just whip it out to your followers. If you're a video guy, weddings, corporate, documentary, something where you don't want to do a lot of retouching, you need an all-day battery and great audio, this camera is ideal. I do not recommend this camera to someone that's a cinematic filmmaker. I am one, I do hardcore DP work. This camera simply does not have the color profiles to back you up. And if you're an enthusiast, you just love photography for whatever reason, you like to travel with your camera, this camera will not let you down. There's really nothing about this camera that should deter you other than the price tag. The 30 megapixels, if you're doing photos, is pretty close to the 5D Mark IV. Video-wise, it's pretty close to the 5D Mark IV, except for like a few design differences. Yeah, if you're an enthusiast, this is a great camera. Just if it's kind of expensive, I'd recommend looking to the M50 or the Canon M6 Mark II. I want to make sure I get that name right. But overall, great camera. There's really no one that I don't recommend this camera to except cinematic filmmakers. Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the video review of the Canon 90D. If you are interested in this camera, there's a link down below for the best pricing on this camera. And if you did like this video, be sure to leave me a like and a subscribe because it really helps me figure out what kind of content you guys are vibing with and what kind of content I should make more of. And lastly, if you have any questions about this camera or anything we discuss on this channel, hit me up in the comments down below and I'll make sure to get back to every single one of you. As always, until next time.